So Guyana has just been hit with a 38% trade tariff by the United States, while other Caribbean countries like Jamaica and Trinidad only received a 10% rate. This announcement came just days after US Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Guyana, offering strong diplomatic support, pledging US military assistance in the event of a Venezuelan conflict. So, why has the United States imposed one of the highest tariffs in the world on a country it claims to support? The answer lies in a combination of oil exports, trade imbalances, and high-stakes international politics. Let's take a closer look. Please click the like button if you find this video useful, and please subscribe to the channel as well. Now, in April 2025, President Donald Trump launched a new trade policy dubbed the Liberation Day Reset. As part of this initiative, a 10% baseline tariff was imposed on all imports into the US, with additional tariffs for countries running large trade surpluses with the United States. Now, Guyana was assigned a 38% tariff, one of the highest rates globally. Now, for context, China received a 34% tariff, and most of the Caribbean remained at the baseline 10%. Now, this policy surprised many, given Guyana's relatively small size and growing strategic partnership with the United States. The key factor behind Guyana's high tariff rate is its substantial trade surplus with the United States, driven primarily by crude oil exports. So, since large-scale oil production in Guyana, the country's export profile has transformed dramatically. In 2024 alone, Guyana exported over $5.5 billion in goods to the United States, with more than $3 billion of that total being crude oil petroleum. At the same time, Guyana imported only $1.3 billion in goods from the United States, resulting in a US trade deficit of over $4.2 billion, according to the US trade data. Now, under the Trump administration's tariff formula, countries with the largest imbalances received the highest penalties. Guyana's 38% tariff reflects an estimated 76% trade imbalance, and this is based not on actual tariffs that Guyana imposes, but on the sheer size of its exports relative to its imports. So this really has nothing to do with reciprocal tariffs. Now, fortunately for Guyana, oil exports are not subject to the new tariffs. The US excluded strategic resources such as energy, gold, and bauxite from the 2025 tariff regime. This means that Guyana can continue to export oil to the US refineries without facing the 38% duty. However, other sectors will not be so lucky. Products like seafood, sugar, rice, timber, rum, and processed foods now will face a significant cost increase when entering the US market. Now, for small and medium-sized businesses in Guyana, this could make it more difficult to compete and result in a loss of critical export revenue. It also undermines Guyana's efforts to diversify its economy beyond just oil, limiting opportunities in agriculture and manufacturing. Now, what makes the timing of this tariff particularly perplexing is the diplomatic context. Only days before this announcement, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Georgetown to reinforce US support for Guyana, particularly in light of the escalating tension with Venezuela over the disputed Essequibo region. Rubio emphasized that the United States views Guyana as a strategic partner and is committed to defending its territorial sovereignty. This public show of solidarity raised questions. Why would the United States impose such a severe economic measure on a country it is simultaneously trying to protect? Now, in response, Guyanese officials, including Vice President Barrett Jagdeo, have argued that the US tariff is based on inaccurate data. According to Guyana's figures, the country imported approximately $2.5 to $2.6 billion in US goods in 2024, much more than the $1.3 billion recorded in the US trade data. Their figures also show that Guyana only exported $3.3 billion worth of goods to the United States. Now, if correct, this would mean that the actual trade surplus is closer to $800 million and not $4.2 billion. A lower surplus would justify a much lower tariff, possibly around 12%, not far from the 10% of other Caribbean countries. Now, Jagdeo has called on the US officials to reconcile this data and emphasized that Guyana imposes no unusual barriers on US imports to the country. Another theory is that the high tariff is being used as a negotiating tool. The Trump administration's policy framework allows for tariffs to be reduced if partner countries can make progress on balancing trade or aligning with US economic or security issues. Now, Guyana already cooperates closely with the United States on security, especially with regard to border surveillance and maritime control. However, it may now face pressure to import more American goods or sign new bilateral trade agreements to address the perceived trade imbalance. From Washington's perspective, this approach shows consistency. All countries, regardless of their size or alliance or status, are subjected to the same economic rules. Now, the economic effects for Guyana are mixed. Oil, gold and bauxite, the country's top exports, remains unaffected. But other sectors critical to local employment and economic diversification are now at risk. For example, Guyanese sugar and rice, which already operate on thin margins, will become less competitive. Exporters of seafood and timber may lose contracts, while agro-processors could see declining orders from the United States. Now, the Private Sector Commission and the Guyanese Chamber of Commerce have both expressed concern, calling the tariff harmful to job creation and business confidence. There are also long-term strategic implications. The uncertainty created by this tariff could make foreign investors more cautious, and although the United States currently exempts oil, future political shifts could potentially put that at risk. Now, Guyana is already seeking new markets in Europe, South America, and the wider Caribbean. But access to the United States, its largest single export destination, remains essential. So, in conclusion, the 38% tariff on Guyanese goods is not about bad relations or political hostility. It is the result of a formula that places economic data above strategic diplomacy. While the exemption of oil provides short-term relief, the impact on Guyana's broader economy cannot be ignored. Now, this episode has highlighted the complexity of modern trading relationships, where economic nationalism can sometimes collide with geopolitical alliances. The government of Guyana is now working through diplomatic channels to try and reduce these tariffs. Whether they succeed may depend on how persuasive their arguments are and how much value the United States places on its long-term partnership with Guyana. Now, in this video, I did a deeper dive in what these tariffs would mean for the wider Caribbean and what the Caribbean can do to protect itself. Click the link to watch and I will see you there.